If I had stopped for just 1 minute that day, my entire life would have turned out differently. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and the first thing I see is his face, soaked by the rain, his tired eyes locked onto mine. He asked me for one simple favor. I said no. At the time, I thought I was making the smartest decision of my life. I had no idea it would become the biggest regret I would carry forever. My name is Emily. I'm 33 years old now. People who know me think I've built a good life. I have a stable job, a beautiful apartment, friends who care about me. From the outside, everything looks exactly the way I dreamed it would when I was younger. But there's one memory I can't escape. It follows me everywhere, every birthday, every Christmas, every quiet evening when the world finally slows down. It always brings me back to one rainy Friday. Back then, I worked as a financial consultant in downtown Chicago. Life moved fast, too fast. Every hour was scheduled, every minute mattered. That Friday had been especially exhausting. My manager had spent the entire afternoon criticizing a project I'd worked on for weeks. By the time I finally left the office, all I wanted was to get home, order takeout, and forget the day ever happened. Dark clouds covered the city, rain poured onto the sidewalks, people rushed past each other without making eye contact. Everyone had somewhere to be, including me. I tightened my coat and hurried toward the parking garage. Then I heard a voice. "Miss? Excuse me." I kept walking. The voice came again. "Please." Something made me stop. I turned around. An older man was sitting alone at a nearly empty bus stop. He looked to be in his early 60s. His jacket was soaked, his gray hair stuck to his forehead from the rain. Beside him rested an old canvas backpack that looked like it had been carried for years. He slowly stood up. "I'm sorry to bother you." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I just need someone to drive me somewhere immediately." Every warning I'd ever heard flashed through my mind. Never get involved with strangers. Never let someone into your car. Never trust people you don't know. I took a small step backward. "I'm sorry," I said. "I can't." He didn't argue. He didn't beg. Instead, he looked at me with a strange expression. Not anger, not disappointment, almost sadness. "I understand." He nodded once. Then, after a long silence, he quietly added, "Then at least remember my face." I frowned. "What?" He smiled weakly. "Because very soon, you'll find out who I really was." A cold chill ran through my body. His words felt oddly specific, almost rehearsed. For a second, I considered asking what he meant. Who was he? Why did he need a ride? Where was he trying to go? But then my phone buzzed. Another work email. Another reminder of how late I already was. I looked back at him one last time. "I'm sorry." Those were the last words I ever said to him. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away, watching him disappear in my rearview mirror. I remember thinking, he's probably just another lonely old man. By the time I got home, I had almost forgotten about him. I ordered dinner, watched a movie, fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, everything changed. I was making coffee when the television caught my attention. The morning news interrupted the weather forecast with breaking news. A photograph appeared on the screen. My heart stopped. It was him, the same man from the bus stop, the same soaked jacket, the same tired eyes. The news anchor spoke slowly. "Police are asking for the public's help after 63-year-old Daniel Carter disappeared yesterday evening. According to family members, he was desperately trying to reach someone before it was too late." The coffee mug slipped from my hand. It shattered across the kitchen floor. I couldn't hear anything anymore. Only one sentence echoed inside my head. "Remember my face." That afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, 2 detectives were standing outside, and they already knew I had been the last person to speak to him. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. One of the detectives, a woman in her 40s with a calm voice, showed me her badge. Emily Carter? Yes, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Every terrible possibility rushed through my head at once. Had something happened to that man? Was he dead? Did someone hurt him? I stepped aside. Please, come in. They thanked me and sat at my kitchen table. The older detective pulled out a small notebook. When was the last time you saw Daniel Carter? The name sounded familiar now. Daniel Carter. I swallowed. Yesterday evening. At a bus stop. What happened? I told them everything. How he had asked for a ride. How I had refused. How he had told me to remember his face. The detectives exchanged a quick glance. The woman wrote something down. Did he mention where he wanted to go? No. Did he say who he wanted to meet? No. Did he give you anything? I shook my head. No. The room fell silent. Finally, the older detective sighed. We were hoping he had. What do you mean? He leaned back in his chair. Mr. Carter wasn't trying to get home. He was trying to find someone. Someone he'd spent more than 20 years searching for. I frowned. Who? We don't know. That answer confused me even more. You don't know? He shook his head. We've searched his apartment, his phone, his emails. There are dozens of notebooks filled with names, addresses, and dates, but none of them tell us who he was looking for. The woman detective spoke softly. His sister told us he'd spent nearly half his life trying to find one person. He believed he owed them something. What? We don't know that either. Every answer only created more questions. The detectives stood up to leave. If you remember anything at all, call us immediately. I nodded. I will. After they left, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Why had he asked me specifically? Why not anyone else? Why say those strange words? Why tell me to remember his face? That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him sitting alone in the rain. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I searched his name online. Hundreds of articles had already appeared. Most repeated the same information. Retired history teacher. Widower.no children. Quiet life. Disappeared Friday evening. Nothing unusual, until I found one interview from almost 15 years earlier. A local newspaper had interviewed him after he donated thousands of dollars anonymously to a children's hospital. At the end of the article, the reporter had asked a simple question. What made you donate? Daniel smiled. Because someone once saved my life. The reporter laughed. Who? His answer sent chills through me. I've been trying to find her ever since. Her. Not him. Her. The person he'd searched for was a woman. I kept reading. Unfortunately, the interview ended there. No names. No explanation. Nothing. Just another mystery. 3 days passed. Then 4. The police still couldn't find him. The story spread across social media. People began making theories. Some believed he'd run away. Others believed he'd been kidnapped. Some even thought he'd planned his own disappearance. I tried to forget about it. I really did. But every time I walked past that bus stop, I slowed down, looking at the exact bench where he'd been sitting. Then, a week later, everything changed again. I arrived home after work and noticed something unusual. My apartment door wasn't fully closed. It was slightly open, just a few inches. I knew I had locked it that morning. My heart started pounding. Someone was inside. I slowly reached for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Before I could dial emergency services, a familiar voice came from inside my apartment. Emily. Every muscle in my body froze. It couldn't be. That voice. I knew that voice. It was impossible, because the police had spent an entire week searching for him, and according to everyone, Daniel Carter had completely vanished. I pushed the door open. The apartment was dark. Silent. Empty. No. Then I noticed something lying on my kitchen table. An old canvas backpack, the same one he'd been carrying the day we met. Underneath it was a handwritten note. It contained only 7 words. Now you finally have a choice. I stared at the note for what felt like an eternity. My Apartment was completely silent. No footsteps. No open windows. No signs that anyone had been there. Just the backpack and those 7 words. Now you finally have a choice. A chill crawled down my spine. I grabbed my phone and immediately called the detectives. 20 minutes later, they arrived. Neither of them touched the backpack at first. The older detective looked at me. You swear this wasn't here before you left? I swear, you didn't invite anyone inside? No, he carefully put on gloves before unzipping the bag. Inside, there weren't any clothes. No wallet. No phone, only a small wooden box, a leather notebook, and an old photograph. The detective picked up the photograph first. His face changed instantly. What is it? I asked. He slowly turned it toward me. It showed a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 10. She was smiling while holding a bicycle. Standing beside her was Daniel, much younger, maybe 30. The picture had faded with time. Across the bottom, someone had written 3 words in blue ink. Thank you, Emma. The detectives looked at each other. Who's Emma? I asked. Neither of them answered. Instead, the woman detective carefully opened the notebook. Every page contained dates, cities, street names, hospitals, schools, shelters, dozens, no, hundreds of places. Each one had a small check mark or a red X beside it. The final page was different. Only one sentence had been written there. I know she's still alive. Below it, one address, my apartment building. I felt every drop of blood leave my face. What? The detective looked at me. Emily, has anyone in your family ever been named Emma? I immediately shook my head. No, but then a memory surfaced. Very old, very blurry. When I was a little girl, my grandmother sometimes called me by another name, not Emily. Emma. I had always assumed it was just a nickname, nothing more. The detectives noticed the expression on my face. What? My grandmother. What about her? She used to call me Emma. Silence. The woman detective slowly closed the notebook. I think we need to talk to your grandmother. The next morning, we drove 3 hours to the small town where she lived. I hadn't visited in months. She was 86 now. Her memory wasn't perfect anymore. When she opened the door and saw the detectives, she looked confused. Emily? What's going on? I hugged her tightly. I just need you to answer one question. She smiled. Anything. I took the photograph from my bag. The moment she saw it, her smile disappeared. She became pale. Her hands started trembling. Grandma, who is this man? She sat down without saying a word. For nearly a minute, she simply stared at the photograph. Finally, she whispered, I prayed this day would never come. The detectives exchanged another glance. My heart was racing. You know him? She nodded slowly. Yes, his name is Daniel. How do you know him? Tears filled her eyes. Because he saved your life. I couldn't process what she just said. What? You were only 6 years old. My mind went blank. I don't remember. You wouldn't. You were unconscious. She took a deep breath before continuing. It happened at the county fair. The crowd was enormous. You wandered away from me. I searched everywhere. I was screaming your name. Her voice cracked. Then I heard people shouting. There had been an accident. My hands were shaking. What accident? She looked directly into my eyes. A truck lost control. It drove straight toward the crowd. I could barely breathe. There wasn't enough time. People were running. Everyone was trying to save themselves. She pointed at the photograph, but Daniel ran toward you. I felt tears building in my eyes. He pushed you out of the truck's path. And she stopped. I whispered, and what? He was hit instead. The room became completely silent. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The man I had refused to help had once risked his own life. To save mine. And I hadn't even remembered him. Grandma wiped away a tear. When he woke up in the hospital, he refused any reward. He only asked for one thing. What? He wanted to know if the little girl survived. I swallowed hard. And we told him yes, but we moved away 2 weeks later. He never found us. Again, for over 20 years, he had been searching for the little girl whose life he had saved, searching without ever asking for money, without asking for recognition, without asking for anything, only to know that she had lived a good life. I covered my face with my hands. I left him alone. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. No, you didn't know, but deep inside, that didn't make me feel any better than the older detective's phone rang. He answered. Immediately, his expression changed. What? He stood up. When he ended the call, every eye in the room turned toward him. He looked at me. They found Daniel's car. I stood up so quickly my chair fell backward. Is he alive? The detective hesitated, then quietly said, "We don't know yet." The drive to the scene felt endless. No one spoke. The detectives sat in silence. I stared out the window, replaying the last conversation I'd had with Daniel over and over again. Please, I just need someone to drive me somewhere. I could have done it. It would have taken 15 minutes, maybe 20. Instead, I drove away. When we arrived, police cars surrounded a narrow road deep in the woods. Daniel's old sedan was parked near the edge of a small lake. The driver's door was open. The keys were still in the ignition. His phone was lying on the passenger seat. His wallet hadn't been touched. There were no signs of violence. No blood. No struggle. It looked as if he had simply walked away. Search teams had already spent hours combing through the surrounding forest. Nothing, not a single trace. The older detective walked toward me. We found something else. He handed me a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was a map. One location had been circled in red. A small wooden chapel almost 15 miles away. Below it, someone had written only 3 words, "One last hope." We reached the chapel just before sunset. It was abandoned. The roof had partially collapsed. Nature had almost reclaimed the building. Inside, everything was covered in dust, except one chair. Someone had been sitting there recently. On the old altar rested a single white envelope. My name was written across the front. Emily. I slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Emily, if you're reading this, then life unfolded exactly the way I feared it would. Please don't blame yourself. You didn't know who I was. You didn't owe me anything. Years ago, people called me a hero. I never believed them. Saving a little girl wasn't heroic. It was simply the only choice I could live with. The truth is, you saved me too. After that day, whenever life became difficult, I remembered your smile in the hospital. It reminded me that one decision can give another person an entire lifetime. That's why I spent years looking for you. Not because I wanted thanks, not because I wanted recognition. I only wanted to know whether your life became a happy one. When I saw you at the bus stop, I recognized you immediately. You looked just like your mother. I asked for a ride because my doctors had given me very little time left. I wanted to tell you the truth myself. When you refused, I understood. Life had already given me my answer. You were alive, healthy, successful. That was enough. Please don't spend your life punishing yourself over one moment. Instead, when you see someone asking for help, look twice. Sometimes people aren't asking for money. Sometimes they're simply asking not to be alone. Take care of yourself. Live well. That's the only way to thank me. Daniele didn't realize I was crying until tears began dripping onto the paper. No one said a word. Even the detectives stood in silence. The woman quietly wiped her own eyes. The older detective looked around the chapel. There's one more thing. He pointed toward a small wooden cross near the back wall. A fresh bouquet of wildflowers lay beneath it. There was no name. No photograph. Nothing. Only another note. Thank you for coming. The search continued for weeks. Divers searched the lake. Volunteers searched the woods. Helicopters flew overhead. Daniel Carter was never found. The case was eventually closed. Officially, he became another missing person. But to me, he became something else. A reminder. For months, I couldn't forgive myself. I replayed that rainy afternoon every single day, wondering what would have happened if I had simply unlocked my car door. Would he still be here? Would we have laughed together? Would I have finally thanked the man who gave me my life? Those questions never disappeared. Eventually, I realized something. Daniel hadn't wanted me to spend my future trapped by my past. He wanted me to make a different choice the next time. So I did. A year later, I left my corporate job. I started volunteering on weekends, driving elderly people to hospitals, helping strangers who had no one else to call, listening to people whose stories everyone else was too busy to hear. Not because I believed I could erase my mistake, because I couldn't. Some regrets stay with us forever, but they can still change the kind of person we become. Today, whenever someone asks me for help, I stop, even if it's only for a minute, because I learned something that rainy Friday. You never really know who the stranger in front of you is, or how much a single act of kindness might mean. Sometimes, the greatest regrets in life aren't caused by the wrong choices we make, they're caused by the right choices, made a few seconds too late.